Hello, my name is Maureen Brennan, and I'm a technical advisor at the Federal and State Grants at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. This is one of a series of very brief webinars that we've put together that are posted with the R3 NOFO that was issued March 1st, 2024. The idea behind these brief recordings is to introduce potential NOFO applicants to some of these critical components of the grant process here at the authority, and to help you build stronger applications and to help prepare you to be a grantee at the authority. So let's get started. Our first topic today is conflicts of interest. We're going to define conflicts of interest, and we're also going to discuss our grantee's duty to report potential conflicts. So let's start with what constitutes a conflict of interest. This language is taken directly from the authority's conflict of interest policy. No employee, officer, or agent of a grantee shall participate in the selection of a contractor, the awarding of a contract, the administration of a contract, or hiring of personnel supported by grant funds if a conflict, real or apparent, is involved. Conflict of interests are really important to us because one of the, the principles of good grant making is that government funds must be used in the best interest of the program. So we always insist that grantees follow a competitive process in order to make sure that the grant funds are used to identify the best staff, the best contractual service provider, the best supply vendor to carry out the grant program. Here are some examples that we've seen of conflicts of interest. The most common one is probably hiring family members or friends without doing a competitive search for new staff. Another one is renting space from your own agency or from that of a relative or a partner, or contracting with agencies or companies in which the grantee has an ownership or has a financial or non-financial interest. Let me give you an example of a real life example that we had a couple of years ago of a conflict of interest that was of a financial matter. We had a program that required a public information campaign. And one of the executives at the grantee agency had a spouse that owned a public information company. So they wanted, of course, to use their spouse's company for this program, this grant funded program. And we said no, that you have to have a competitive process. They're like, no. The spouse is really going to give us a good deal. We're going to get the family discount. But we said no, that we made them do a competitive process. And lo and behold, through this competitive process, the grantee received a number of really strong proposals. They ended up selecting one that turned out to be very successful and actually came in way under the cost that had been projected by the spouse, even with the family discount. So that's a real simple, real clear example of a financial conflict of interest, because the spouse had a financial interest in that company and benefited from the non-competitive, would have benefited from a non-competitive procurement. But you'll see on the slide that I mentioned financial and non-financial interests. So let's look at an example of what a non-financial interest could be. What if instead of owning that public information company, what if that executive's spouse sat on the board of an agency and the grantee decided to enter into a subaward with the spouse's agency where she sat on a board without going in through a competitive process? Again, it's that personal connection that is giving that agency access to the grant funds and to participating in the grant program. So even though the spouse who sat on that agency's board didn't get any financial gain from having the subaward, made with the agency with which he had a relationship, she didn't make any money off of it. But the agency that she has that interest in, that non-financial interest as a board member, they gained something by having, the access to being in this program, to getting the funding of this program without going through a competitive process. So that's a good example of a non-financial interest, conflict of interest. And so, again, we have to always go through a competitive process to make sure that we're always giving access to those funds to the best agency, to the best staff that serve the program. So the best way to avoid a conflict of interest, whether real or potential, is to always competitively select staff, subcontractors, and vendors, as well as subaward agencies. If you do have any potential or real conflict of interest, the best way to handle that is to always talk to your grant specialist. Let them know about it, because if you fail to disclose any real or potential conflict of interest, you know, typically those costs will be disallowed. That subaward will be voided. Those costs will not be reimbursed. In the extreme, it could actually end up with the termination of the grant award if it's a serious enough offense. The best way to handle it is to always disclose any potential or real conflict to your grant specialist, because then we can work with you to examine that potential conflict of interest and work to address it, so that there are no serious remedies like these. So that's a real brief look at conflicts of interest. Here's the full list of all of the brief webinars that we're posting with this NOFO. If you have any questions about the NOFO or about the content of any of these recordings, please be sure to submit your question to the NOFO Q&A. That is updated every week, so check back throughout the life of the posting to see what questions have been posted and to review the answers. Thanks for joining us.